Konnichiwa. Wow. Sing Konnichiwa.
Welcome to Think Like a Strategist, and today we have Warren from Demographica. So today the question that we're asking is, how does one think like a strategist when it comes to B2B? So, there's a difference between, or at least, I don't know, Warren will be able to unpack for us whether there's a difference between B2C and B2B. So we'll be talking about B2B and unpacking the differences between the two. Welcome, Warren.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So firstly, maybe if you can just talk to us a little bit about your journey, just briefly, and then your introduction into B2B. How did it all start?
So my background is actually in direct marketing. And direct marketing is a big precursor into B2B. And how it all happened was that we were running a direct marketing agency. And we had a couple of clients, both B2B and B2C. And we were failing badly on the B2C clients, but we were winning on the B2B clients. And we were trying to figure out why was this the case? And after some analysis, what we realized was that the B2B clients, the audiences were much smaller. So in B2B, we were marketing to 50 or 100 companies. And in B2C, we were marketing to tens and millions of consumers. So when you're marketing to 50 companies, you can move the needle because you can pick up the phone. It's a direct marketing business. You can pick up the phone, you can phone 30 of them, convert them into a lead, and you have a 60%, 70% conversion rate. You can move the needle. In B2C, you cannot because there's 10 million. So we were generating 50, 60, 70% response rates in B2B and 0.1 and 0.2% response rates in B2C.
Yes.
Happy B2B clients, unhappy B2C clients. so simply as simple as that. That was the first trigger. And then we did some analysis. We looked in more mature marketing economies, like in Europe and in North America, and we realized quite quickly that in those economies there are very mature B2B marketing ecosystems. There's education, there's award ceremonies, there are B2B agencies, specialist B2B agencies, B2B only pitches, and in South Africa at the time there was nothing. There was no agency that positioned themselves as a B2B agency. It wasn't a thing. So we thought, well, maybe that's an opportunity to focus and specialize Demographica from a direct marketing agency into a B2B agency. And we did. We went overseas, we learnt, we did some good partnerships with some brilliant B2B agencies around the world, and they taught us everything we know today. And that's how I got into it, and it's probably been one of the only real strategic decisions I've made in our business journey. Everything else was luck. This was a decision, and it's been good for us.
Amazing. So what's interesting is that you mentioned that it wasn't a thing. Now I'm interested, was it not a thing for clients as well? Was there no demand from clients to say, okay, we need somebody who can actually help us with this particular thing?
I don't think marketing directors identified as B2B marketers. I think they're just identified as a marketer. And if you're a marketer, whether you're working for a B2B brand or a B2C brand, the principles of marketing stay the same. That's how they are applied, I think, is what changes it. And that's the lens that one looks at it with. Without a healthy supply of B2B agencies and without a supply of B2B education, marketers might not know. They don't know what you can get. So marketers don't always know what they can get. So you need a supply of B2B expertise to show brands what they can get. And then once they realize what's available and what can be done, then you start to see change. That's why I think it is a thing now, because now we're seeing marketers identify as B2B. I'm seeing B2B pitches. I'm seeing peer group agencies hiring B2B people. They're advertising for it in their job specs, B2B creatives, B2B strategists, B2B client service people. That didn't exist 5 years ago. We're seeing more of that now. And that validates where we're going. I saw in January, Cannes created a whole category just for B2B. That's never happened before. B2B
Amazing.
work had to find a place in other categories. Now there's categories just for B2B.
Wow.
And that's a massive validation on where the category is going. And I hope that the local industry follows suit.
Absolutely. So then what is, if there's starting to be a shift where people are specifically highlighting B2B, according to your understanding or your definition, what's the difference between B2B and B2C by definition? How would you define the two?
So I think there are a few differences, but I think the biggest difference is context. So a person who makes a decision to buy something on behalf of a business does so in a different context to when that same person makes a decision to buy something for his or herself as a consumer. And understanding that context is where the nuances of B2B comes through. So firstly, it's very seldom one person that makes the decision. You have a group of people that make a decision. We call that group a decision-making unit or a DMU. And there are different members in a DMU. You might have the person that's signing the check. It's not the same person that's using the product. It's not the same person that influences the decision. So you probably have, I think at last study, there were 6.5 or 7.5 members in a decision-making unit. So as marketers, we can't solve for one of them. We have to solve for all of them. And all of them have different drivers, motivators, and context. So that's one core difference. The other core difference is the purchase decision is long. In B2C, you walk into a store, you can make a snap decision on what to buy. You can get caught up in promotions and colors and merchandising, all the B2C tricks that I know very little about, but you can get caught up in them. It doesn't happen in B2B. In B2B, you have procurement, and you have spreadsheet decisions, and you have considered decisions. But the caveat to it is also true. Business decision making can be extremely emotional. And we can talk a little bit about that later. And then the third difference is the risk of the wrong purchase is detrimental to the company and often the person's career. So in B2C, if you walk into a store,
I've bought the wrong coffee, by the way.
Okay.
But no one died.
Exactly.
Or no one got fired.
Very, very little downside.
Yeah.
Okay. The bigger ticket items could have bigger downside because it's a lot of money, but generally very little downside. In B2B, if a bank appoints the wrong technology provider, that can be detrimental to the bank, and the team of people that made that appointment can lose their jobs or can put a massive dent in their careers. So the risk associated to the wrong purchase is high, both for the individual and the company. So the risk is higher. And then the fourth core difference. Sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. Sorry.
So we've got the context, we've got the customer, we've got the risk.
The risk, the length of the purchase decision. It'll come to me later. I'll bring it up again in a bit later. I forgot what it is.
No, but I think that's quite interesting in that. So from a B2C perspective, right? When you talk about the purchase decision and everybody who's involved, if I'm selling cereal, there's this ad by Milo which I loved, where you've got two people to sell to. You've got the child and you've got the mother, right? So you're trying to convince the mother that this cereal doesn't have as much sugar as you think it is. So you're trying to focus the mother on something positive. They had this very basic, but strategically I thought it was a beautiful ad, where in the execution, they have the mother, sort of like the mother goes through the day in the life of their child. They go to school, they're in the classroom, and then after school, they're doing hockey, and then they're doing soccer, and then the mom goes like, now I get it, why my son needs Milo. You know, so from a consumer perspective, it's easy to identify our target audience, from a consumer. In fact, we even put them in focus groups. We talk to them. It's like, why do you like this? Why don't you like this? But it sounds much more intricate and much more complex from a B2B perspective. How do you then go about understanding the needs of that complex value chain that ultimately leads up to the company as a whole making the right purchase decision?
There are in B2B, and in particular in large enterprise level B2B, brands are operating in an extremely commoditized environment. Very little differentiation between Bank 1, Bank 2, and Bank 3. Very little differentiation between Insurer 1, Insurer 2, Telco 1, Telco 2. So why does a business buy from Bank 1 versus Bank 2? Or Telco 1 versus Telco 2? It's the people in the room at the end of the day. It's the chemistry. So people buy from people, but people buy from people they like and trust and have a chemistry with. So in commoditized environments, how does one differentiate? How can you influence those purchasing decisions? We believe it's about understanding the buyer and what are their motivators and drivers above the functional stuff. So the functional stuff would be, can the product and service do its job? Is it priced right? All that stuff, is the support right? That's all table stakes, and that all has to be right. But everyone's got that right. So what's the next layer? The next layer is understanding what drives them. And a good example of this is in technology purchases. So B2B technology purchases are massive. And usually the decision maker, the core decision maker in a tech purchase is the chief technology officer or the chief information, the CIO or the CTO. But there's a lot of people around the CTO that influence that decision. But ultimately, the decision sits with the CTO. So understanding a CTO and what type of person is a CTO and what drives a CTO is so important so that you can create communication that resonates on a human level with that person. And I love this example because it's one of those insights that when you hear it, you're like, yes, I never thought about that, but actually that's so true. So technology changes quickly. And there's Moore's Law, which is now being even decreased. Technology changes every couple of months. So this CTO exists in a world where stuff becomes irrelevant quickly. And their job is to make sure that their company remains relevant based on digital transformation in their businesses. So they're living with this fear of irrelevance. Their company is existing and their task is to keep it relevant. Plus there's a whole thing of relevance. So when you create communication that talks to that, how to help them stay relevant, how to help them keep their company relevant, that's not a technology conversation. You're now on a brand level connecting with your audience in a way that resonates with them. And once you're in the room and once you're having that type of a conversation, then you'll be having product conversations and service conversations, but that comes further down the funnel. So B2B, when we speak about the funnel, that funnel is not just, we don't just speak about it, it's very, very real. And we've got to be able to connect with our audience at the top of the funnel, resonate with them, create chemistry with them, and only once they are in our funnel, once we are having a conversation with them, can we pull them through the funnel. That's where you weave in the product, you weave in the solution, you weave in the price, the support, all the necessary table stake stuff to get them to purchase.
So what tactical tools do you use to getting to a point where you know what they want or what they need? Like, this is what they actually need, above and beyond the functional stuff.
It's people. Those are the tactical tools. The whole premise of B2B is to get people in the room with people.
Okay.
To have conversations, to solve for issues together. And all the technology, all the ad technology and marketing technologies that exist, we believe are there to drive human-to-human engagements, because that's where the magic happens. That's where people can solve for each other. That's where you can really understand what a chief financial officer needs, or a CEO needs, or a CTO needs. People at that level of business don't put that information out there and hope that it comes out of conversations, comes out of networks. So the big premise of B2B marketing is to create what we call opportunities, even revenue generating opportunities between supplier and buyer. And the more of those that we create, the more value we're bringing. And everything is around creating those meetings, those opportunities, those face-to-face conversations where people can create value together.
So how does a business or a marketer know that they need B2B specialized services?
Marketer. So there's a statistic, I think it's 80%, that a buyer, so in this case a marketer, will complete 80% of their purchase journey before they even reach out to a supplier. So if we stay in this example, your buyer is a marketer, your supplier is an ad agency. When the marketer decides that they want to appoint an agency, they will do a whole lot of their own research, whether it's online or they'll phone friends, they'll phone colleagues, they'll scan the web, they'll do their own research, and that research will give them a list of agencies. And those are the agencies that they will then reach out to. That's 80% of the purchase journey complete. So there were a whole lot of other agencies that were excluded from that list that didn't even know they were in the game. Okay? They had no idea they were even being searched for. They had no idea that this marketer was in the market for an agency. So to answer your question, how do they get there? Agencies are B2B businesses. Okay, so they have to be creating enough of a presence consistently over time to make sure that you're catching marketers when they're in their awareness phase, when they're at the top of the funnel. And we think the way to do that is to be creating content in whichever form it may exist that resonates with the marketer, because lots of good agencies, also you could argue quite a commoditized environment between agencies. Most of the good agencies can do the stuff, most of the medium agencies can do the stuff, and so on. So it's about creating enough awareness in marketers' minds at the top of the funnel, so that when they start to action it, they're now already in the middle of the funnel. And that's when you can engage, and that's when you pull them through the funnel.
Okay. So if you were to compare Company A and Company B, Company A only has the services of a creative agency, and Company B has the services of creative agency and a B2B specialist like yourself. Which one is more likely to do better between the two?
So it depends on what better means. So generally speaking, creative agencies are specialists at the top of the funnel. They create awareness and brand recall and all of the stuff, and that's the speciality. B2B needs to capture that demand. True B2B agency should be able to capture that demand and put it through the funnel up until the point of purchase. So if the brand has already strong brand awareness and already has a presence in market, then I would argue more work has to happen at the middle and bottom of the funnel to capture that demand and turn it into commercialize it. If the brand doesn't have as much of a presence, isn't as well known, then often there is a bigger job to be done at the top of the funnel, and then the middle and bottom of the funnel can come in a little bit later. So it depends, and it depends on what success, on how we define a better outcome or what success looks like. But in B2B, the audiences are much smaller. Therefore, you can track it easier. It's much easier to report in B2B. So it's important that B2B marketers are held accountable to revenue. It's the one environment where you can attribute revenue to marketing spend. And we try to push that. We push that agenda a lot because it empowers marketing directors significantly to be able to sit at the exco table and say, you know, if you decrease my marketing budget, here's the impact on revenue. Or if you increase my marketing budget, here's the impact on revenue. And that's much easier to do in B2B than it is in B2C.
Okay. So you spoke about the fact that, you know, agencies are B2B. And if that's the case, how should agencies be going about, you know, to be successful in that regard, you know, attracting clients and marketers?
I think the way to do it is the way a B2B marketing strategy is generally written. So it's understanding who is the audience and sizing it, then understanding who in the audience makes that decision, because it's not just the marketing director. So I spoke earlier about a decision-making unit.
Correct.
The marketing director is one core member of a DMU, but there's also marketing managers, brand managers who would influence that decision heavily. There is procurement who would play a massive role in that decision. There is head of sales that would play a massive role in that decision. So there's a whole lot of people in a DMU. So you would need to structure the DMU. Then one would need to understand what are the motivators and drivers behind all the different members in the DMU, and then prioritize them, because you may not want to communicate to all of them, you might want to communicate to some of them. And then put together, as you would any strategy, you know, a messaging framework, a asset list, plot it all on a funnel, orchestrate it so that you can understand and expect different levels of engagement from different people on different assets, and creativity. You've got to put a campaign together. It's got to be pinned on a big idea.
Correct.
You've got to build out and run it as though you would a campaign, as though you would do it for your clients. But I think the absolute key, is to understand the drivers behind who you're talking to. You know, people, business buyers. In this example, marketing directors, but you can extrapolate that out into most large enterprise. Business buyers make very defensive decisions in business. They don't always make the decisions that are in the best interests of the company. They often make decisions that are most easily defensible. And Rory Sutherland speaks a lot about this. He speaks about this behavior in B2B decision making, where he says it's much easier for a B2B buyer to justify a decision that's backed up by data than it is to justify a decision that you made on gut.
So even if you fail, you've got something to point to.
Correct. It didn't work, but here's how I got to this decision. Correct. It's logical.
It's not me.
So it's okay. Right? Versus, I really like Boghosi and that's why I hired his agency. You can't defend that. It's very difficult to justify, even though that's exactly why they bought you. So what often happens is you see purchasing decisions being made, and then data is created to back rationalize that decision. And that's why you always see justifications after the fact.
After the fact,
It happens often. And that's because people make decisions defensively. They need the data, otherwise they could lose their jobs. And people make decisions in their own to protect themselves. And you see it at all levels in B2B buying. And as a B2B marketer, it's very difficult to deal with that. But the way to deal with that is to provide content that helps a buyer justify their decision, because they need that anyway.
Sure.
So in B2C, when we think of marketing assets, we don't think of things like cheat sheets, playbooks, battle cards, B2B marketing assets that the buyers can use to motivate why they bought from you. You almost do the thinking for them, because it makes it easier for them to justify their purchase. So if we bring it back to this example that we're discussing between marketing director and agency, if the agency provides the marketing director with enough physical collateral that the marketing director can use to show why they selected this agency, you make the decision much easier for them.
Nice.
So I decided to buy into this agency because they've won these 5 awards. They got these 5 credentials. This is their track record. Here are their references. Here are their recommendations. It makes it so much easier for them to buy versus, I like that agency, so I'm just going to go for it because I have a gut feel about them. You can't defend that.
You can't
it doesn't
defend
work.
that.
How's that defensible? And in more nimble, agile, entrepreneurially run organizations, that might fly. But in big corporate enterprise, doesn't roll.
No,
Doesn't
absolutely.
work.
And what's so interesting is that even big item purchases are a gut feel. You know, when I got into my apartment, it wasn't the walls. It wasn't, you know, I had viewed one in the same estate. I had viewed one and then moved to the next one. But the one I moved into, it was a feeling, you know, which I think is quite interesting. So in terms of, you know, B2B, right? I'm just trying to think about it. There's something you mentioned which I thought was quite interesting, where you say creative agencies generally end at the top of the funnel, right? Where you generate awareness, high levels of awareness and interest, and then you almost complete the funnel where you come in. But I think generally, I've personally have always cared about or were interested in the entire funnel, you know. It's like, how does the work we do at the top, where you do have the awareness, other people within the business who form part of the value chain aligned to the work that we're doing at the top of the funnel. So I've always been, in principle, you know, like, okay, ultimately the work that we do needs to lead to a purchase decision. And so the question that I want to ask is that, in principle, is that a B2B mindset, to be worried and caring about the entire funnel, not just, okay, we've done an ad and then that's it, to be worried and maybe interrogate clients to say, okay, what are we doing? The ad is out, people are seeing our messaging. What are people going to say, or how is your stuff going to engage with the audience? Does everybody in the business know? Does your sales team know? Is that like a B2B principle in essence, or how would you? Where would we sit in that instance?
I don't think it's a B2B principle. I think that's a marketing principle. I think that B2C or B2B, the purchasing funnel exists. And should be considered throughout the whole campaign. But what I see in practice is that generally creative agencies focus on the top of the funnel, and there isn't a lot of focus on the middle and the bottom of the funnel. That's left to the business to capture. So we're going to run the campaign. It generates the awareness and then increases demand, and then the stores must fulfill the demand, or the call center must fulfill the demand. And the problem with that is that not all demand is equal, because not everyone is ready to buy right now. So some people are phoning to inquire, some people are phoning to buy, or walking in to buy or inquire, and then you have low conversion rates because not all leads are equal. But if you think about these things in a funnel, where you capture the demand at the top of the funnel and then use the middle of the funnel, which is generally consideration and evaluation, and the bottom of the funnel, which is purchase, if you use those principles to nurture prospects through the funnel, that's when you get less leads, but much higher conversion rates, because you're only selling to people that are ready to buy. And you are servicing and supporting people who are still going through their own journey. So I don't think it's a B2B thing. I think B2B agencies are particularly good at it, because you have to facilitate that whole purchase journey, because the sales organizations in B2B are often in the same organization, where in B2C it's often two different organizations. In B2C you might have Procter & Gamble that create the products, but then you've got Pick and Pay that sell the products. Two different organizations. In B2B it's often the same organization, so the accountability of going through the funnel is much higher. So B2B agencies probably do it better, but it should be, in my view, it should be considered in all marketing. I think that's a marketing principle, not a B2B marketing principle.
Do when you work with a client, right? So obviously, in principle, in strategy, we talk about positioning, right? That you need to have a positioning statement. You need to understand where the brand stands. So in the work that you do you follow the same principles that, a creative agency would follow, or a consultant or whatever, in terms of coming up with a strategy? Like if you've worked on a client recently, do you apply the same principles? And if you do, can a predominantly B2C strategist do a B2B strategy?
I love that question because it opens up the extension on strategy. So you do follow the same principles. Positioning is positioning. And a brand needs to land in the heart and minds of its audience, whether it's in a B2B context or a B2C context. I think where B2B goes a bit further is the complexity around who the audience is, because it's not just the mom and the kid. In your earlier example, it's this whole unit. It's got to cater for an exceptionally long purchase journey. B2B purchase journeys we've seen them go as long as 24 months. So your campaigns need to, in B2B, we don't talk about big ideas, we talk about big, long ideas. Because the idea needs to live the length of the purchase journey. And so from a strategy level, from a planning point of view, there's much more complexity in the audience. The length of the purchase journey is much longer, so therefore you've got to be creating material or content that can last and be relevant throughout the whole purchase journey. And the messaging changes for each DMU member depending on where they are in the funnel. So you have lots of different messaging to lots of different people at different times, but the audience is still much smaller.
Correct.
So in B2B, if you're marketing to, we often get it, our clients will say to us, we want to hit the JSE top 100. And the JSE top 100 is 100 companies. And if we apply the 7.5 people per DMU, that's only 750 people. Am I right? Is my math's right? 75 people.
Yeah.
750. I don't know. Whatever. 750 people. The whole audience is 750 people. If you want to market to the top 100 JSE companies. So that can therefore lends itself to being very direct, very personalized, very bespoke, which is why I said earlier that direct marketing is a good precursor to B2B. Because in direct marketing, you're working with highly customized, highly personalized, direct pieces, content that's dynamic and changing for each person because each person's needs are different. It all stems off having strong data. So one of the big precursors one of the big dependencies of good B2B marketing is really strong data capabilities. You need to know who you're going after. You need to know about them. You need to know what to say to them, how to say to them, over what channels to say to them. And that all comes out in the strat. So I think that B2B strategy is I think it's got more layers than B2C. And can B2C strategists do it? Absolutely, provided they're given the frameworks and the tools to do it. What I love about strategy is that it's so framework driven. And when something's framework driven, you can have 3 different strategists working off the same framework on the same brief. We get 3 different strategies.
Absolutely.
Because you bring your own flair to it, you bring your own nuances to it, but the work is likely to still be applicable.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So on the components of a strategy, right, whether it's B2C or B2B, so from a consumer perspective or from a B2C perspective, we have, like generic but specific objectives in that it's about, it could be, awareness is a default. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're just putting in work out there, you should get awareness, right? But if the objectives are sort of like, getting people to consider or to change perceptions around, a particular product or a service or a brand, or you're trying to introduce a product. In the B2B world, what kind of challenges and objectives do you generally deal with? What are clients from a B2B perspective trying to solve?
Yeah, they are different. We see things like, So you'll get a brand that has, we see in B2B the 80-20 rule applied a lot, where you've got, massive part of their business with a very small amount of customers. So one of the core objectives in strong B2B marketing is to increase depth and breadth of relationships in a client, in an existing client. So you'll see a brand, and they are dealing with this division of a client. And a core objective is to increase, they're dealing with division 1, they will now deal with division 2, 3, and 4. So a big objective of a B2B marketing plan can be, how do I grow my influence in a business? So we see that a lot.
So what does that mean, growing influence in a business?
So I'll give you an example in our world, in the agency world. So we're working with a bank, and we're servicing one division in the bank.
Okay.
But I want to also service division 2, 3, and 4. So that would be an objective if I was briefing my agency. How do I grow my influence across the 4 divisions so that I can start to supply all 4 divisions, not just the one division?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about increasing the breadth and depth of relationships in existing clients. So that's one core objective. A second objective we see a lot is this idea of changing perception. And we see it a lot in financial services, we see it a lot in telco, we see it a lot in ICT, is that the telcos are good examples. So you've got a telco, and they are known for telecommunication, network specifically. They're not known for cloud services, they're not known for consulting services, even though they have these capabilities. So it's about, so the brief is often, how do we change the perception of the telco from being a telco to a techco? We see that a lot, because their clients are only buying telecommunications from them because they only see them as a telco provider. They go to consulting to someone else. They go to cloud services to someone else, but the telco wants them to come there. So that's another core objective, to change perceptions of companies with their clients. The big one is always revenue growth. I said earlier that B2B marketing is much more measurable than B2C. You can link it to revenue. So often we get, last year we grew by 10 or 15%. Without marketing, we're going to do that again. We need you to grow us by 25%. So we try to link the incremental growth to marketing spend. And then the last one we get a lot of is demand generation. Is leads. How do we generate leads? And that's always a brilliant conversation, because almost always companies see all leads as being equal. So if a business customer fills out a form, that's a lead. But it's not.
It's not.
No, it's not. So the way we look at leads is we have 3 states. We have what we call an unqualified lead, or a UQL, a marketing qualified lead, an MQL, and a sales qualified lead is a SQL. And we do, and the objectives are to generate lots of UQLs, but then nurture them to become MQLs, to become SQLs, and ultimately into sales. And a big part of that type of work is what's known as sales enablement. There are a lot of B2B speciality services that traditional agencies don't do. Things like sales enablement, things like social selling, things like account-based marketing. And often that's the type of work that gets the most interest, because people don't know it, people haven't seen it, it's still quite new in a relatively immature B2B marketing economy like South Africa is. So we see growth there, but those are the objectives. It's generally so they're not necessarily the same as in B2C, but they are very specific around improving the position of a brand with its clients. It's not always about getting new clients. It's often about retaining the clients and growing existing clients, especially in more depressed or recessed economies in particular.
You mentioned the 3 things. The one I remember is sales enablement. What are the other 2? And if you could just unpack what those specifically are.
Sure, there's a long list of them, but I'll unpack those 3. So sales enablement is the work a B2B agency does to enable a brand salespeople, enable a brand sales team. So salespeople, when they go out and they sell, they are armed with collateral. And it's usually a PowerPoint presentation, a brochure, some branded pens, a notebook, whatever it might be. But they're actually not designed optimally. They are often not tech-based. They're usually designed by product people, not thinking about with the customer in mind. There's a famous quote from a professor, the late professor of marketing at Harvard, Professor Theodore Levitt. I'm sure you've come across him, and it's a consumer quote, but it's so real in B2B. He says consumers don't buy quarter-inch drills; they buy quarter-inch holes.
Yeah, I know
and it's so true in B2B. And when product people design collateral, they're designing collateral advertising their quarter-inch drills.
Correct.
But businesses are not buying that. They're buying solutions to a problem.
Correct.
So a lot of the work we do is switching that around, helping the salespeople and the marketing people see that we've got to design their collateral from the business's perspective, not the product perspective. So that's just one example of sales enablement. There's amazing marketing technologies out there today that help salespeople sell better and help buyers buy better.
Okay.
Remember I said earlier that buyers buy defensively. So they need stuff to help justify their purchases.
Correct.
So a lot of the work we do with our clients is enabling their sales teams, but also enabling their buyers, enabling their customers so they can buy better.
Correct.
And that's all encompassed in what we call sales enablement. Second one is called social selling. So social selling is I mean, I personally practice it a lot, and it's massive. And what that is so LinkedIn is an incredibly strong B2B social network, exceptionally strong. And LinkedIn is structured in a way that gives what we call intent signals of buyers. So if I want to land a new account, when I'm running Demographica, if I want to land a new account, I'll almost always start on LinkedIn. And I'll use various social selling techniques to build a relationship with a marketing director for 2, 3, 4 months before I ever reach out to that person. So that by the time I reach out, there's a whole lot of context that's been set. They know who I am, they know what Demographica does, I've delivered them value using various social selling techniques, and therefore when I reach out, I'm not an unqualified person. I'm a very qualified person, and we already have a digital relationship. That's an example of one-to-one, but the whole concept of social selling is that can be frameworked.
Okay.
That can be a whole program that can be implemented for a sales team, provided by marketing, so that when those meetings are had, a whole lot of context already exists. Remember I said earlier that all the work we do is around putting people in the room together. So social selling is a massive precursor to getting people in the right rooms together under the right context.
Right.
And then the third thing, and it's probably Demographica's most in-demand service. It's probably Demographica's most in-demand service is it's called account-based marketing, or ABM for short. And ABM is when a company, a brand, a client, has customers that are so big that they deserve their own marketing program. So you have one-to-one ABM, where a brand markets to a customer as a market of one, and they'll spend a whole host of money just marketing to one company. And then you get what we call one-to-few ABM, where brands cluster their clients into clusters based on commonalities.
Okay.
Could be industry, could be geography, could be internal metrics like profitability or happiness or unhappiness or whatever it might be. And then you create marketing programs to these clusters of accounts. And again, closely linked to direct marketing. So those are three. You get other stuff. I mean, public sector marketing is a massive part of B2B, because the way you market to decision makers in the public sector is very different to the way you market to decision makers in the private sector. In the public sector, it's about understanding, and it literally stems from the state of the nation. you've got to understand the state of the nation. Then you've got to understand the budget. Then you've got to understand how that filters down into the different departmental priorities. And then the different minister strategies. And then the different... Because if you're a telco and you want to sell to the department of whatever, unless you understand the department's strategic priorities
Correct.
and how it ladders up to the minister and how it ladders up to the president, you got no chance.
No, absolutely.
So a lot of the work we do is around helping, that's a B2B purchase.
Correct.
Is around helping businesses better position themselves in the public sector to help the departments achieve the country goals.
Correct.
SME marketing is another one. SMEs, when I look at Demographica, there isn't a client we have that doesn't have 2 to 3 SME briefs in our system at any point in time. Because South Africa is fueled by SMEs. We have
Correct.
hundreds of thousands of SMEs, both formal and informal. How do you market to SMEs? SMEs are, it's an interesting one. Most big brands treat SMEs like consumers.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they market to them like consumers.
Wow.
Retail-driven marketing. And in some instances, it's an interesting play because actually the way an SME buys is like a consumer.
Is it?
Yeah, an SME will walk into a store and buy a business product. An SME will phone a call center and buy a business product. A corporate doesn't behave like that at all.
True.
Okay, so the way they buy looks like a consumer.
Okay.
So therefore brands think, okay, we'll market to them like consumers, but it's so wrong. Because the way they buy is like a consumer, but their context that they make a decision in is as a business owner.
Context.
So it's all context. So I find that personally really interesting on SME marketing. And then employee engagement is also a big part of B2B. Internal comms is a part of employee engagement, but employees in a company, the way companies communicate internally and the way they engage their employees, we're seeing that become a bigger part of the type of work we do. Because again, their context is in a professional level, not on a personal level.
How would you unpack and define employee engagement?
Well, employee engagement is the wrong word. Employee experience is a better word.
Okay.
It's about designing employee experience programs for companies to keep employees, to provide them a platform within which to excel in. Because employees need, at least the philosophy that we look at it is they need autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, and companies can't always give it to them. But they can create an environment where that is possible. But only if you're intentional about it.
Correct.
So the work we're doing is around creating environments where this can be achieved, where employers are providing platforms for employees to do that. But ultimately, and employees don't like to hear this, ultimately it comes down to the employee making use of it, leveraging it.
No, absolutely. We
see lots of times where we create these platforms or environments and employees still just come to the office and leave. They don't engage. And I think with this is just more a personal view, with anything in life, what you put in is what you get out. And if you put it in and you make the effort to engage, I think you get bigger results versus hoping it happens to you.
No, absolutely. I always feel like, as employees, we want to be given stuff. It's just like take. We're always ready to take. But if you then say, as an employer, the responsibility is actually up, it's your responsibility, then it's like, no, but what are you doing for me?
We're digressing a bit, but the best way I can explain it is a brilliant quote I heard from. I'm a massive soccer fan, and
favorite team?
Tottenham Hotspur.
Cut.
And I listened to an interview with Jose Mourinho once.
Oh, the special one.
Yeah, but he said something which I thought was profound. He said he was being interviewed by one of the reporters, and the reporter said to him, it seems like you're struggling to motivate your players. And he turned around and said, it's not my job to motivate the players.
Wow.
he said motivation is intrinsic. It's a product of who you are, where you come from, how badly you want it, how badly you need it.
Correct.
He said, all I can do is create an environment for them to excel. They've got to bring the motivation.
Wow, I love it.
And I thought that was profound.
No,
because
absolutely.
as an employer, I often think about how do we keep our people happy and how do we motivate them and how do we get the best out of them. And that, listening to him say that and then applying that in my world was like, actually, all we can do, I can bring them clients.
You're overextending
I
yourself.
can give them tools. I can give you all the stuff you need, but you've got to arrive at work.
Yeah.
You've got to bring your motivation here. I can't motivate you. I can't inspire you.
Yeah.
You've got to bring that to work.
No, absolutely. So internal comms is an internal job.
I think so. I think as employers, and the last 2 years have amplified that. You know, when COVID hit, I thought about how we're going to keep our people happy and safe, and we did all the things, you know, to do that, and I think we did well. But at the end of the day, and this is why I loved what he said, you know, motivation, inspiration is a product of who you are. How badly do you want it?
How badly do you want it?
What is your background?
Yeah.
You know, are you arriving at work today ready? Or are you expecting your employer to, you know, motivate you to be ready? I don't think it works like that.
And I think that distinction becomes apparent where I think most of the players at Man U don't like Ronaldo for that fact. I think he gets more upset than the coach. You know, when the guys don't perform, he gets upset. It's like, guys, do you want this or not? You know, and it's so obvious and it's so apparent in his success. He's so internally motivated. He wants it so bad, you know. But getting back to the subject, you mentioned something which I thought was interesting. You mentioned big idea, but you called it big, long ideas. What does a big idea look like for a B2B environment or ecosystem? And maybe just to unpack a little bit around the big, long idea. I think it's an interesting one.
Sure. Well, one of my favorite campaigns ever is a campaign called Fearless Girl. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, always.
Fearless Girl. Sorry?
Is it always?
No, it's called Fearless Girl, and basically what it was there is an asset manager in the US who built a statue, a bronze statue.
New York.
Yes.
And
they put the statue in front of the charging bull on Wall Street. And she's kind of standing there like this in defiance
of the bull.
And I mean, it won everything it can and all of that. And that's a B2B campaign.
Is it?
State Street, who are the client, is a B2B business. And basically what that campaign was that State Street created a fund, and this fund would only invest in companies that were majority controlled by women. And they weren't the first asset manager to do that. They weren't the first. There are many funds that only invest in companies that are controlled by women or majority controlled by women. But this execution was the embodiment of a big idea that they had around women's roles in corporate America, and that it just wasn't equitable. So that manifested in the execution of this statue in front of the bull. Now, we talk about that as a big long idea because the execution was this statue. But the big idea was not about the statue. The big idea was the role of women in corporate America and bringing awareness to the fact that it's completely unequitable, and on a business level, it took State Street advisors. It became, I think, it was like the most successful fund launch in like the history of fund launches. There's a whole Wikipedia entry on it now.
So B2B can be exciting.
So this is the thing. So and I'd love to talk about that because we struggle to attract creatives because they don't want to work on B2B. Okay, and they don't want to work on B2B because, for many reasons, but I think the fact that Can have just created a B2B category is a game changer.
Absolutely.
Because there's now a place for creatives to showcase their work on that level. I don't know if you've seen the ad for Volvo trucks.
With Van Damme.
Absolutely.
Robin, I love it.
That's a B2B
ad.
Yeah. That's a B2B ad.
Absolutely.
Businesses buy trucks, not consumers. Okay.
Yeah.
For me, I think the best B2B advertiser in the world is General Electric, is GE. I mean, they're a B2B, they're one of the biggest B2B businesses in the world.
Yeah.
Microsoft's a B2B business. I don't know the number, but like 70-80% of Microsoft revenue is B2B.
Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Google's a B2B business. All Google's revenue, most of the revenue comes from advertisers.
Correct.
It's B2B.
Correct.
So how we think about B2B businesses and creativity in B2B, I think that's where the real growth space is. I think what Karen just did is massive. I think we're going to see a lot more excitement in the B2B category.
Correct.
And I think in South Africa in particular, South Africa has a history of brilliant advertising, creative advertising.
Correct.
The South African creatives are extraordinary. Extraordinary. Absolutely world class. But they haven't shown up in the B2B space. And a lot of the B2B work I see is that top of the funnel awareness work that's actually not B2B.
B2B.
Just because a ad is for a B2B client doesn't mean that's true B2B work. And what I talk about when I say true B2B work, I'm saying it's considering the full funnel,
Correct.
not just the ad,
and
not
the
just
message,
the top of the funnel. Exactly. What's next? What's it capturing? What action is it creating? It can't just be about, those days are gone. It can't just be about the ad. It's got to be part of a program
Correct.
that pulls prospects or businesses through a funnel.
Correct.
And I think that the South African South African creativity can make a massive mark there, because one thing we have in South Africa, we have brave clients. I see it. We have really brave clients in South Africa, not just Demographica clients. Clients, I think, are really brave. Number two, South Africa has a lot of stuff going on, and when all that stuff generates creativity, it creates opportunity.
Correct.
And I think when you mix those two together, the fact that it's an untapped space and we have our stuff and we have super world-class creatives, I think South Africa can show up there significantly. And I just hope that we do.
That's amazing. I like how you framed the difference between, I don't remember how you articulate the first bit, but you said there's a difference between that and B2B work. So like there's the work and possibly one just having experience in doing, maybe if you could just talk about that a little bit.
I sat in a meeting once with a marketing director, and we were pitching against a competitor agency. And the agency chief creative officer stood up and said, no, they have lots of experience working on B2B. Not experience, they do B2B. And the marketing director said, show me. He said, well, and he put up a slide and he listed 15 years worth of work on B2B brands. And the marketing director turned around and said, I know that you've worked on B2B brands, but none of that work is B2B work. And it landed for him, because the true B2B work isn't just about the ads you've done on B2B clients. What happened after the ad? Okay, because remember, in B2B organizations, the sales team exists in the organization. You're servicing them. You're generating demand so that they can capture the demand. So the ad creates the awareness. The ad creates the interest. The ad creates the demand. And the ad, I'm not talking about necessarily above the line, on any platform.
Correct.
But what happens after that? You can't say, because it clicked through to a microsite, job done. No, purchasing decisions are long. So if it generates interest, now you've captured that interest. How do you now move from interest to consideration? What do you need to supply all the members in the DMU to help them make a decision? And then to help them justify that decision? And then what happens when they're at the bottom of the funnel? And now the salesman is sitting in front of them.
Amazing.
He can mess up the whole thing.
True.
Or he can completely accelerate it if he's got the right material and he understands the buyer.
Correct.
And he understands how the buyer buys. That whole process is the role of the agency, not just the ad.
Correct.
So I think that's what B2B looks like in mature economies, and South Africa is getting there.
Okay.
More and more we're seeing. I meet some exceptionally strong B2B marketers, exceptionally strong ones, but they are not supported.
Okay.
They don't have the support of. They don't have enough resource in their own businesses. They often don't have enough respect in their own businesses.
Shame.
There's a in B2B organizations, I find the gap between sales and marketing is very wide. And a lot of the work we try to close that gap, because they need to work together. They should have the same KPIs. You know, they often have conflicting KPIs.
Wow.
So it can never work. So
I think I just love that distinction, you know, between working on B2B brands versus doing B2B work. You know, so I just want to close, you know, with these two questions. The first one being, you know, in there's something that you mentioned which I thought was interesting, in segmenting and targeting, you know, target audiences or a market. The Nike's campaign is brilliant. The current campaign is called Play New, where I just love it. Like, strategically, it's on point. You know, it's about how does Nike increase their base in terms of, at the end of the day, they are a sports apparel brand, right? So, and to grow your business, there are many case studies and thought leaders who speak about to grow your base is to get more people to buy from you. So their campaign now is they tapping into different pockets, and they're showing us that you actually don't need to be athletic. If you're just moving, you know, if you've got doing activities where there's intense movement, you might as well be an athlete. You know, they've done this campaign with Megan Thee Stallion. Because she's a performer, she dances. You know, it requires a lot of energy. By default, it makes her someone who should be wearing Nike, you know, apparel. And now they're targeting people who are not pro athletes, but they play sports, you know. So in that sense, it's like, okay, I can see myself with Nike soccer boots, or, you know, in that sense, from a B2C perspective, you need to target more people who are different, so to speak. But it sounds like from a B2C or from a B2B perspective, you within an organization, but you need to speak to different people who are ultimately similar, and that they're working for a company with the same vision, same. It's almost like there's one audience, but you break it down.
You're tapping into the real detail of the nuances of B2B. So when business decision makers make purchasing decisions, they act on a few things. So if they let's just use a chief financial officer as an example. So a CFO is very often a big part of that decision-making unit. You can group all chief financial officers and say, well, CFOs behave like this. But that's way too broad, because they don't all behave in the same way. You could group CFOs in a category, and you can say CFOs of manufacturing businesses behave like this versus CFOs of technology businesses behave like that. You might find that that theory does hold water, because the way you manage the finances of a manufacturing business is different to the way you manage the finances of a technology business, and therefore they think in similar ways, right? That category versus that category. But there's a third layer, and the third layer is the values of the actual company. At that level, at that C-suite level, the values of the company influence how the people in the company behave. Less so at the lower level, very much so at the C-suite level. So it's important when considering the messaging to consider the values of the company you're marketing to. Because if the CFO can see their own company values in the seller, you're creating that chemistry. So I said earlier in this conversation that people buy from people, but people buy from people they like and trust. And we believe that that can come through in communication, not just face-to-face, in actual marketing material, in those assets. So that layer of understanding the CFO in a category, and then understanding the company values influences the messaging on that one-to-one basis, on that one-to-one level.
Okay. So I know I said 2 questions, now I've got 2 more questions. So firstly, how does one get into, firstly, if I'm a marketer, right, or if I'm a business, I've never done B2B, I've never considered B2B, or I've never thought about the significance of having a B2B specialist. Why should marketers, and maybe possibly even agencies or creative agencies or strategists, let's talk about strategists, why should strategists be thinking about, or extending their thinking into B2B? What is the significance of doing that? What value would I bring? So if predominantly I've done work where it's like B2C, we present the consumer, we present different profiles, and then we present, insights and say, this is what consumer need, this is the big insight, this is the big creative idea, here's your TVC. What would be the value that I'd be bringing, to the table if I were to extend further and say, from a B2B perspective, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're saying for a strategist in the consumer world?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, and why I'm naturally more drawn to strategists and strategy is that I think that our life experiences influence our work, and the more and diverse those life experiences are, and that learning is, the bigger impact we have in our work. So, if I was a B2C strategist, I think that we should be learning the whole spectrum of clients and people, and how people think and behave. And behavioral economics is a massive part of it. So I actually think that whether it's B2B or B2C, the underlying study is behavioral economics, which is why Rory Sutherland is such a big personality and expert in that space, because he can speak freely B2B, freely B2C, because he understands people. He understands how people behave. But the difference between the two is the context in which they behave in. That same CFO will behave like a impulsive, money's irrelevant buyer in a personal perspective, personal context, but like a prudent, considered, spreadsheet-driven decision maker in a business environment. Same person, different context. Just got to understand the context, and therefore you understand their behaviors.
Wow. Okay, last question.
Yes.
Where does one study B2B? How does one get into B2B? Is it something that you practice, or are there frameworks, are there tools, are there things that one can actually get into to start being able to practice and execute within this space?
So luckily we live in a world now where you can study anywhere. So in the UK, there are brilliant B2B marketing resources to study, which I can send you, and you can put on your platforms. In South Africa, there's nothing. In South Africa, there's no B2B education in any marketing degree whatsoever. There's not even a module for B2B. I know Red and Yellow were putting one together, and there might still be. Demographica has our own that we offer our clients and potential clients. But other than that, there's nothing really, other than the online stuff that I've come across in the UK.
Wow.
It's very underdeveloped. It's an opportunity.
There's no module. Is there a paragraph? Like in any textbook?
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much, man. Thank you for joining in and, coming through and giving us an opportunity to talk about, B2B.
It's a pleasure.
I really appreciate you, man.
Of course, and thank you for having me.
And I wish you all the best with your business. I hope, in fact, I think all companies should be coming to you, for that specialist. Because I think if companies and businesses do better, that will have a ripple effect on the economy. The more successful businesses become, I think the better for all of us. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool.
Thanks, Percy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. But
Oh, we've got a gift for you.
thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate
Cool.
it. Thank you.
This is a gift to say
Very unnecessary, but thank you.
very necessary.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Sing buyeni nyilanga. Konnichiwa. Yazibongela bedinganga. Konnichiwa. Wow.